Hey everybody, Chris here. Welcome back to another episode of Steel Soldiers TV. Today we're back working on the pipeline truck, and we're specifically working on the battery system. Now, if you'll remember, when we did this recovery, some jerk had stolen the positive and negative cables out of the battery box. They'd taken some cutters and got away with about 2 feet of copper wire. Can you imagine? So we were ticked, and we thought we were hosed. We thought we were going to have to drive 20 minutes to the nearest auto parts store and get a couple of cables. But thankfully, we found a couple of cables on a scrap refrigerated trailer, and we're able to make those work. And they've been working okay, but it's time for them to go. The negative cable has actually loosened up. The solder joint where the cable goes into the back of the lug has loosened up, and it's been arcing. And again, it's time for them to go. So I got a couple of new cables and a couple of new terminal clamps, and we're gonna go ahead and get those installed on the truck today. So here's the typical battery box on a deuce and a half truck. Same thing as you'd find under an M35A2. So anything we talk about today will apply to that truck as well as any of the deuce and a half trucks. A couple of batteries in here. These are just batteries. These are not 6TLs. These are some batteries I had sitting around from another truck, and so we've been making use of these. I've got my battery clamp sitting here because they don't really work with this smaller battery. So I'm going to try to rig something here to get the battery clamp to actually hold those down. You can see all kinds of nice rust here and moss coming out from the hole in the cab. Again, we're doing a cab swap on this truck, so I'm not too worried about it. But man, you can see just how roached this truck really is. This is all Bondo that the military had slathered on there, and you can see how rusty the fender is, all against these supports and everything. It's just gone. So thankfully, I've got a cab that we're going to swap into or onto this truck. We've got new to me fenders and steps and cab and air tanks that we've got to swap on. But one thing at a time. Right now I'm just trying to make the electrical system more reliable. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the battery box out. Then we'll have a lot more room to work in there. Let me give you a close up here. All right, so you can see the negative. That's this thing that's kind of painted white. And it's got a great big lug on there. This is something we found on a transformer that was sitting on a lot up there. But actually it worked out fine. I mean, it's the negative. You're not too worried about it arcing against the frame or the body or anything like that, because, you know, it's a negative ground. You're fine. But that's actually worked pretty well. And the positive, you can see it, this kind of funky red cable going back into the back there. And we've got another kind of cable splice on it, holding it together. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull the box out, get these batteries and stuff out of the way, and then we'll be able to go ahead and disconnect the old negative and the old positive. The positive goes over here onto the back of the starter. So it's gonna be a little bit more of a chore to get to. Have to slide underneath the truck and get that off. All right, let me get this box out of the way, and then we'll go ahead and work on those cables. Of course, you know what happens anytime you try to move the battery box with the battery hold down off of it. These J-bolts fall down through the down to the bottom of the hole there, and then they hook on the underside of the battery box. It's such a pain in the ass. So you got to kind of keep these bolts up out of the way so they don't get hooked, and kind of pull the battery box out at the same time. So it's really like a 2 or 3 person job. But anyways, let me get these things kind of hooked up out of the way. See, this one right now is, it's fun trying to do this and record at the same time. This one has turned around and has hooked the underside. So there we go. Now we got it kind of up where it's supposed to be. But you got to try to hold those and pull the box out at the same time. Huge pain in the butt. All right, so now you can see what we're dealing with here. Again, this positive cable, it's not bad. You know, it's got a decent lug on it, still holding tight. But this negative has come completely apart. You can see where it's just kind of unsoldered itself and has gotten loose and has actually been arcing in there. So every once in a while, I'll try to start the thing and you'll hear it, you know, and you're like, oh crap. And have to climb down here and, you know, kind of wiggle this thing around a little bit and get it to make contact. So again, it was supposed to be just a short-term fix to get it home, and I ended up neglecting this fix for a long time. Finally getting around to getting this done. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these cables loose and remove them from inside the truck here. And once we get the old ones out, we'll be able to go ahead and get our new ones situated. This is our positive cable here, and over here on the ground next to the garage, I've got the negative. And then I've got a couple of new clamps, hold downs. What the hell are those things called? Terminal clamps. And then this is our original jumper wire. Right now I've got this jumper wire on there, which is okay. These wing nut doodads are nice because this can be your security system. You know, you can take the jumper wire off, and you know, when you got to park somewhere, keep somebody from driving away with your truck. So I may just leave this one on for right now, and you know, again, use that as my security system. So I think I'll just concentrate on getting these junk cables off here. All right, so we got our battery box out of the way, and it's full of about half a pound of cab metal and leaves. Now we can get a good look at our negative cable, and it mounts right here. The step comes up and bolts to the frame here, and it goes under this step bolt. So I'm going to hit that with a little bit of penetrating oil. It looks mighty rusty. There's a chance it's going to rain here shortly. The sky's not looking too good. So I'm going to try to get this negative done first. I can live with the positive for a little while longer because at least that terminal's not falling off. So let's work on the negative first, and then we'll see how much time we have left before it rains. All right, so I got a wrench on the back of that thing, backed it up, and now we got the nut removed. So now we can go ahead and remove our cable. Slide it off of there. Don't lose that start washer. All right, there you can see our really fancy cable splice there. But you know what, it worked. And the funny thing is that, you know, what they stole really didn't even count for much. I don't see any copper in that ground cable, do you? Idiots. All right, so here's our new ground cable, and we'll go ahead and slide this carefully. See if this nut's still smoking hot. Ooh, it's still warm. This is one of those ovaled lock nuts. That thing would have been such a pain in the butt to take off with just a regular old ratchet. I love impacts. It's so much better than fighting with these doggone, all this rusty hardware and these lock nuts. Technically, you're probably supposed to replace these things when you remove them, but you know what? I think it's still locking just fine. So we'll go ahead and run that down with our impact, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and put the cable end on. So I just found out that the starter wire that I got, the hot lead that goes to the battery box, is the wrong size. I looked up the part number and ordered it off of eBay, and somehow ended up with the wrong size. So that sucks. But anyways, at least I got that ground changed out. That thing was the real problem, where it was coming apart and arcing. So at least I got that changed out, and I'll work on getting a new hot lead this week, and then I'll get that swapped out. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and get the battery box back in there, get everything hooked back up so I can get this thing mobile again. So I actually had to adjust this thing so that the lug is facing up. I put it back on the way it was, which was the lug, you know, facing down. But when you shove the battery box in there, the metal plate on the back of the battery box, this thing goes right up against the frame. And so when you do that, there's no real way to get the negative cable into the proper position, because it's wanting to hang down, you know, behind this thing. So I flipped it so that the negative is actually facing up. So now when I bring the cable across to hook to the top of the battery, I'll just be able to drop it down into position like this, you know, up on top. So in the meantime, I'll just sit it over here out of the way on top of the fuel tank and wrestle this battery box back into place. As you know, these things are heavy, so I found that sitting it on a 5-gallon bucket's a good way to not have to go all the way to the ground with it and strain yourself trying to pick it up flat off the ground. So I just sit it on top of a bucket. That way you're not overworking yourself. So let me slide this thing back into place, and then we'll get it all buttoned up for the evening. So I had to take care of one last thing while I had the hood open. Noticed that my fan belts had been flopping around a little bit and that my generator wasn't charging like it was supposed to. And the turns out the belts had loosened up so much that the pulley was just not engaging all the time. After it warmed up a little bit, sometimes the belts would start to grab. So I loosened up the lock bolt there at the top, and then the lock bolts down at the bottom there. Used my piece of 3/4 wood here to gently tension the belts, make sure they weren't overly tight. Don't want to burn up any bearings. And then just now got everything locked back down again. So we're ready to go ahead and give it a spin. Make sure we're charging and make sure everything is working good underneath here. Got all of our wires back in place, and you can see our new ground wire there on our shiny new ground lug. Looks fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and find the correct hot lead, and then I'll get that one swapped out in an upcoming episode. But that's going to do it for this episode of Steel Soldiers TV. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today as I swapped out this ground lead. Project was not too bad. A little bit of a trial and error thing there as far as the positioning of the ground lead. But once I figured that out, it was no big deal. Very disappointed that the hot lead doesn't work. But you'll have that, I guess, dealing with surplus sometimes. And I've had that thing for about a year in the garage. So there's no sending it back at this point. So I'm going to get back into the parts manual, find the correct part number, get back out there, search for a new one, and then I'll swap that one out at some point in the next couple of weeks. Be sure to keep tuning back in if you guys haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you always get a notice when we put a new episode out there. And we're going to keep you guys posted as we continue the restoration project on this 756A2. Got lots to do. Got to do a cab swap. All the front sheet metal has to come off, and we'll swap out the fenders and the splash guards and the steps, the air tanks, the cab, and then I've got a lot of rust repair to do on the bed itself. So lots of stuff coming up on this. Keep tuning back in, and I'll see you guys again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.